They shot him 20 times, not in a firefight, not in some foreign desert, in a parking garage in San Antonio, Texas. 4 men with silenced pistols, standing over a Navy SEAL, firing round after round into his body until he stopped moving. They left him for dead. But they made one mistake. They didn't know who was working the ER that night. A rookie nurse, 5 weeks on the job, put her hands on a man with no pulse, 20 holes in his body, and refused to let him die. By morning, 9 patients saved. 1 impossible night. And then the FBI walked through those doors. Not to say thank you, but to ask one question. Who is she? Because Grace Ellison doesn't exist. Alamo Grace Hospital, October 14th, 7:48 p.m. Subscribe now, follow this story to the end, and comment your city. I want to see how far this one travels. The alarm hit at 7:48 p.m., not the regular kind, not the soft chime that meant a fender bender or a kid with a broken arm. This was the level 1, the one that makes your hands go cold before your brain catches up. Multiple gunshot wounds inbound, unknown count, ETA 2 minutes. Every nurse on the floor stopped. Every doctor looked up. 2 minutes. That's all they had. Dr. Thomas Aldridge was halfway through his 3rd coffee when the call came through. 26 years in trauma surgery. Strength, 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 strength. He set the cup down and walked toward the trauma bay, not running. Running meant panic. Aldridge didn't panic, but when the doors blew open and that gurney crashed through, even Aldridge felt it. That sick drop in the stomach that no amount of experience fully kills. Male, late 30s, military ID confirmed, Navy SEAL. 20 entry wounds, multiple calibers, vitals crashing. The paramedic was shouting, blood on his gloves, blood on his shirt, blood soaking through the sheet faster than anyone could absorb. The man on the gurney was pale, not hospital pale, ghost pale. The kind of pale that meant the body had already started to quit. Aldridge leaned over and looked. 20 holes, some clean, some ragged. Chest, abdomen, left thigh, right shoulder. Entry wounds layered on top of old scars, like someone had tried to kill this man more than once and never quite finished the job. BP 70/40, the tech called out. Pulse weak, arrhythmic, dropping. Aldridge's jaw tightened. He turned to the team. Get me 2 units of O-neg. Page Dr. Salazar for surgical assist. Somebody find me a... He won't make it to surgery. The voice came from behind him. Quiet, calm. The kind of calm that didn't belong in a room that smelled like iron and adrenaline. Aldridge turned. A woman stood at the edge of the trauma bay, gloved, gowned, already positioned at the patient's left side like she'd been there before anyone else arrived. Her badge read, Grace Ellison, RN, first-year staff. Aldridge frowned. Excuse me? If you open his chest now, she said, you'll hit the intercostal bleed. He'll be gone in 40 seconds. You need to stabilize the pneumothorax first. Pack the abdominal wounds, lateral to medial. Buy the blood bank time. The room went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet, the kind where everybody holds their breath because somebody just said something that either saves a life or ends a career. Aldridge stared at her. 5 weeks on staff, no advanced certifications, no trauma fellowship, and she was standing in front of him telling him how to run his own bay. Nurse, step back and let the team. The monitor screamed. Flatline, the long, terrible whine that every person in medicine prays they'll stop hearing and never does. Get the paddles, Aldridge shouted. Grace's hand shot out. Wait. What do you mean, wait? He's in arrest. It's not cardiac arrest. It's a tension pneumo. Defib won't help. You'll waste the window. Aldridge hesitated. 1 second, maybe 2, but in an ER, 2 seconds is a lifetime. Grace didn't wait for permission. She reached for a 14-gauge needle from the crash cart. Her fingers moved without trembling, without searching. She found the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, and inserted the needle with one clean, precise motion. A hiss of trapped air escaped the chest cavity. 1 second, 2, beep. A heartbeat flickered on the monitor. Beep, beep, weak, irregular, but alive. Aldridge exhaled. His hands were shaking. Hers were not. "What did you just do?" he said. Grace didn't look up. "Bought you time. Use it." He stared at her for a long moment, the kind of look a man gives when he realizes he's standing next to someone who knows something he doesn't. Then he turned to the team and started barking orders. But he didn't forget. The next 4 hours were war, not the kind with guns and sand, but the kind fought under fluorescent lights with steady hands and failing bodies. Patient after patient rolled through those doors. A highway pileup brought in 3. A bar shooting brought 2 more. By 10 p.m., the ER was full and the staff was stretched to breaking. And in the middle of all of it, Grace. She moved between beds like she had a map in her head that nobody else could see. Quiet, efficient, no wasted motion. She wasn't the loudest voice in the room. She wasn't giving speeches or shouting orders. She just appeared where she was needed, did what had to be done, and moved on. The SEAL, Lieutenant Colton Briggs, they learned from his military ID, was the worst of them. 20 wounds, blood pressure that kept dropping no matter how fast they pushed fluids. His body was giving up, organ by organ, like a house losing its walls. By 9:30 p.m., Aldridge had been called away to another critical patient. Grace was alone at Briggs' bedside. His vitals were fading. The monitors told the story in numbers that kept getting worse. "Hemoglobin still dropping," the anesthesiologist called out. "Transfusions aren't holding." Grace looked at the blood chart, then she looked at Briggs. Then she said something that made the anesthesiologist stop cold. "This isn't blood loss. His coagulants are failing. He's been on anticoagulant suppressants, probably classified protocol. His blood isn't clotting because somebody put him on thinners before this happened." The anesthesiologist blinked. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I've seen it before." "Where?" Grace didn't answer. She was already adjusting the IV protocol, switching the fluid balance, compensating for what the standard transfusion couldn't fix. Not with a mystery drug, not with some magic injection, with knowledge, the kind you don't learn in a classroom, the kind you learn when someone is bleeding out on a stretcher in a place where the nearest hospital is 4 hours away, and you're the only one who can keep them breathing. "Vitals stabilizing," the tech said, voice shaking with disbelief. "Heart rate coming up, pressure climbing." The anesthesiologist stared at Grace. "What did you just do?" "My job," she said. Aldridge came back 20 minutes later, sweat on his forehead, expecting to sign a death certificate. Instead, he found Colton Briggs alive, pulse steady, breathing on his own. "He was gone," Aldridge said slowly. 20 minutes ago, he was gone." "Not anymore," Grace said. Aldridge's voice dropped low. "You changed the protocol." "I adapted it. That's not your call to make." "He's alive. That's the only call that matters." Aldridge looked at the man on the table, chest rising, heart beating, alive against every odd in the book, and said nothing. Because she was right, and they both knew it. By 1:42 a.m., the ER finally went quiet. 9 patients, 9 critical cases, 9 lives saved. The night shift staff looked like they'd aged 10 years in 6 hours. Nurses sat against walls. Doctors leaned on counters. Nobody spoke for a while. They just breathed. The charge nurse tallied the board and shook her head. 9 saves, 1 shift. That's got to be some kind of record. An intern standing nearby said quietly, "It wasn't the shift. It was her." Everyone knew who her meant. Grace didn't hear any of it. She was sitting beside Briggs' bed, adjusting his IV with the careful attention of someone who wasn't ready to stop watching. His fingers twitched. His eyes opened halfway. "Am I dead?" His voice was like gravel scraped across concrete. "Not today," Grace said. He looked at her, really looked. Not the way a patient looks at a nurse, the way a soldier looks at someone who speaks the same unspoken language. "You've done this before," he said. "Not in a hospital." Grace's hands paused on the IV line, just for a moment. Then she continued, "You should rest, Lieutenant. How many times?" "How many times what?" "How many times have you brought someone back who was already gone?" She didn't answer. She pulled the blanket up over his chest, checked the monitor one last time, and stood. "Get some sleep," she said. "We're not done yet." She stayed until sunrise, long after her shift ended, long after every other nurse had clocked out. She sat in the chair beside his bed, watching the monitor's rhythm like it was a promise she'd made and intended to keep. The hospital was still now. That fragile kind of stillness that only exists after chaos, when the adrenaline drains and you can finally hear your own heartbeat again. From the hallway, 2 interns watched her through the glass. "She's been here 12 hours, one whispered. "She hasn't eaten, hasn't sat down until now." The other shook his head. "That's not a nurse. That's something else." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you don't learn that kind of control. You survive it." When morning came, the story broke before the coffee was ready. Rookie nurse saves 9 in one night, including decorated Navy SEAL. It was on every local news station. Reporters crowded the hospital entrance. Cameras flashed through the glass doors. Inside, the staff whispered her name like it was something sacred and dangerous at the same time. Grace walked past all of it, head down, eyes tired, badge still crooked on her scrubs. She didn't stop for cameras, didn't smile for reporters. She walked to the time clock, punched out, and headed for the door. The charge nurse called after her. "Grace, you're trending online. You know that?" Grace paused. "I'm not the story." "Then what is?" She looked back toward the trauma bay. "The fact that he's still breathing." She pushed through the doors into the morning sun. The air was warm, San Antonio in October, still holding on to summer. The parking lot was quiet. Her car was the last one in the row. She got in, closed the door, put her hands on the steering wheel, and sat there. Because inside her chest, something was breaking open that she'd spent 12 years sealing shut. A memory. Sand under her boots. The echo of gunfire that never really stopped. A voice, his voice, shouting her name through smoke and dust, dragging her across ground that was more blood than dirt. She closed her eyes and gripped the wheel until her knuckles went white. "Not now," she whispered. "Not yet." But the past doesn't wait for permission. Back inside the hospital, Aldridge stood by the glass doors, watching her drive away. His arms were crossed. His face was tight with something more complicated than suspicion. The security officer beside him shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, she just saved 9 people. Is a background check really?" "Run it," Aldridge said. With all due respect," Aldridge repeated, "nobody saves 9 people by accident. Nobody performs a needle decompression with that kind of precision on their first year. And nobody identifies classified anticoagulant protocols without military medical training." He turned to the officer. "Find out who Grace Ellison really is, because I don't think that's her name." That night, Grace sat on the floor of her apartment. Small, quiet. No photographs on the walls. No family pictures on the shelves. Just medical textbooks stacked in a corner, a folded American flag on the top shelf, and a single dog tag lying on the kitchen table. She picked it up, ran her thumb across the engraved letters. S.G.T. Ryan Maddox, USNOPOS, Catholic. Not her tag, his, her husband, the man who carried her out of hell and didn't come back. She held the metal against her palm, feeling the weight of it, too small for everything it meant, too heavy for everything it remembered. "I kept the promise," she whispered. "I stayed out. I stayed quiet. I lived the life you wanted me to live." She set the tag down. Then she saw the phone on the counter. One missed call. Blocked number. No voicemail. Her blood went cold. 12 years. 12 years of silence. 12 years of being no one, of disappearing so completely that even the military believed she was dead. And now, one night, one impossible night, had put her name back in the light. She picked up the phone and stared at the blocked number. She knew what it meant. She'd seen it before. The call that comes before the knock. The knock that comes before everything falls apart. She set the phone down face first on the counter. Then she walked to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and let the water run. She stared at her reflection, dark circles under her eyes, jaw tight, hands still carrying the faint tremor of a 12-hour shift. Her badge was still clipped to her scrubs. Grace Ellison, R.N., a name she'd invented in a courthouse in Nevada 4 years ago. A name that existed on a nursing license, a lease agreement, and nothing else. She unclipped the badge and set it on the edge of the sink. "They're coming," she said to the mirror. Not a question, a fact. The way a soldier states coordinates before a mission. She turned off the water, walked back to the kitchen, picked up Ryan's dog tag, and put it around her neck, tucking it under her shirt where it rested against her heartbeat. Then she sat in the dark and waited. Because Grace Maddox, the woman she used to be, the woman the military declared dead in 2011, the woman who promised her dying husband she would never go back, knew something that 12 years of hiding couldn't erase. When the war finds you, you don't get to choose the battlefield. You just get to choose whether you're ready. At 8:03 the next morning, 2 black SUVs pulled into the hospital parking lot. The engines cut. The doors opened. 2 figures stepped out, suits too clean, posture too rigid, badges catching the Texas sun. They walked through the ER entrance like they owned the building. The front desk clerk looked up, coffee halfway to her lips. "Can I help you?" The taller one, sharp jaw, gray at the temples, eyes that had interviewed 1,000 liars and remembered every one, held up his ID. "Agent Marcus Hale, FBI. We're here to see Nurse Grace Ellison." The clerk frowned. "She's off shift. What's this about?" Hale's voice was steady, measured, the kind of voice that makes simple questions sound like loaded weapons. "We'd like to understand how a first-year nurse with no advanced trauma certifications performed a needle thoracostomy, identified a classified anticoagulant protocol, and resuscitated a man with 20 bullet wounds who every doctor in the building had already pronounced dead." The clerk blinked. Hale leaned forward, just slightly. "And we'd especially like to understand why, when we ran her name through every federal database we have access to, Grace Ellison doesn't exist before 2019. He straightened up, adjusted his badge, and said the words that changed everything. "Because whoever saved that seal last night, she's not who she says she is." Hale didn't wait for an invitation. He walked past the front desk, past the charge nurse who tried to stop him, past the security guard who reached for his radio and then thought better of it. Sandoval followed 2 steps behind, her eyes scanning every name tag, every face, every doorway like she was cataloging escape routes. They found Grace in the supply room on the 2nd floor. She was restocking gauze packs, her hands moving on autopilot, the kind of mechanical rhythm a body falls into when the mind is somewhere else entirely. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. She'd driven home, sat in the dark for 3 hours, and driven back because staying away from the hospital felt more dangerous than staying close. Grace Ellison? She didn't turn around. Her hands kept moving. Gauze, tape, saline packs, shelf by shelf. "Miss Ellison, I'm Agent Marcus Hale. This is Agent Priya Sandoval, FBI." Now she turned, slowly. The way someone turns when they've been expecting a sound and it finally arrives. "I know who you are," she said. "I saw the SUVs from the window." Hale studied her face. No panic, no confusion, no surprise. That bothered him more than anything in her file. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about last night. I already filed my incident report with the hospital." "We're not the hospital," Sandoval said. Grace looked at her, then at Hale. Then she pulled off her gloves, dropped them in the bin, and said, "Break room's down the hall." They sat across from each other at a table that still had someone's half-eaten sandwich on it. Hale opened a manila folder. Sandoval stood near the door with her arms crossed. Grace sat with her hands flat on the table, palms down, fingers still. "You've been on staff here for 5 weeks," Hale began. "That's correct. Your application lists volunteer experience at overseas medical clinics. No names, no dates, no references we can verify. They were remote locations. Record keeping wasn't a priority." "Where exactly?" "East Africa, Southeast Asia, a few months in the Middle East." "Which countries in the Middle East?" Grace paused, not long, a half second, but Hale caught it the way a fisherman catches a ripple before the fish breaks the surface. "Jordan," she said, "mostly Jordan." Hale nodded. He didn't believe her. She knew he didn't believe her. They both sat with that knowledge between them like a card neither one was ready to flip. "Last night," Hale continued, "you performed a needle decompression on a patient in cardiac arrest. That's a procedure typically performed by emergency physicians or advanced paramedics, not first-year nurses. The patient was dying. Nobody else was moving fast enough. You also identified that the patient was on anticoagulant medication, medication that wasn't listed in any chart, any intake form, any record we can find. You adjusted his treatment protocol based on that assessment. How did you know?" "I recognize the bleeding pattern. I've seen it before." "Where?" "In the field." "What field, Miss Ellison?" Grace's jaw tightened. "The kind where people bleed and you don't have time to fill out paperwork before you stop it." Sandoval stepped forward. "Let me be direct. We ran your name through every federal database we have access to. Social Security records, IRS filings, state licensing boards, DMV, immigration, military personnel files." She paused. "Grace Ellison appears for the first time in 2019. A Nevada driver's license, a nursing school application in Phoenix, a lease in San Antonio. Before that, nothing. No birth certificate, no school records, no tax returns, no digital footprint of any kind." Grace said nothing. "People don't just appear out of nowhere," Sandoval said. "Not real people." "I'm sitting right here," Grace replied. "I'm real enough." Hale leaned forward. "Ms. Ellison, the man you saved last night, Lieutenant Colton Briggs, is not just a Navy SEAL. He's a federal witness. He was scheduled to testify before a classified military oversight committee next month. The men who shot him 20 times in a parking garage 3 miles from this hospital were not amateurs. They were professionals hired to make sure he never reached that witness stand." Grace's expression didn't change, but her fingers pressed harder against the table. "Thanks to you," Hale said, "he's alive. Which means the people who tried to kill him now know they failed. Which means they know where he is. Which means this hospital, right now, is a target." "Then protect him," Grace said. "We intend to. But first, we need to understand something." Hale slid a photograph across the table, an old one, faded. 2 people in military fatigues, standing in front of a concrete barrier, desert sun washing out the background. A man and a woman. The woman was younger, thinner, her hair pulled back under a patrol cap, but the eyes were the same. "Is this you?" Hale asked. Grace looked at the photograph. Her breathing changed. Just barely, just enough. She didn't touch it. "Where did you get that?" "From a classified personnel archive that, officially, doesn't exist." Hale's voice dropped. "The woman in this photo is Petty Officer Second Class Grace Maddox, Navy combat medic, attached to Special Operations Medical Support in Iraq and Afghanistan, 2008 through 2011. Declared killed in action, Kandahar Province, March 2011. He paused. She's been dead for 13 years. Grace stared at the photo. The man beside her in the image, tall, grinning, desert dust in his hair, one arm draped over her shoulder like the world couldn't touch them, was Ryan. Her Ryan. The man whose dog tag was pressing against her chest right now, warm from her own pulse. "That's not me," she said quietly. "The fingerprint we pulled from your nursing application was corrupted, intentionally scrubbed. But we recovered a partial from a water glass in the staff kitchen yesterday." Hale's voice was almost gentle now. "It matched. 94% probability. You're Grace Maddox." Silence. The refrigerator hummed. Someone laughed in the hallway outside. The world kept turning like it didn't care that hers had just cracked open. "If I were this person," Grace said slowly, "and I'm not saying I am, why would the FBI care about a dead combat medic?" "Because dead combat medics don't save Navy SEALs with classified trauma techniques in civilian hospitals," Sandoval said. "And because the man you saved is about to blow the lid off a military program that somebody spent a lot of money burying, a program called Field Stabilization Group." Grace flinched. It was small, a micro-expression, a flutter at the corner of her eye, but Hale saw it the way a hawk sees a mouse move in tall grass. "You know that name," he said. "I don't. Your hands just told me you do." Grace looked down. Her fingers had curled into fists without her permission. She flattened them back against the table. FSG, Hale continued, was a classified black budget program that operated between 2007 and 2012. Its stated purpose was battlefield trauma stabilization, keeping critically wounded personnel alive long enough for extraction and treatment. But the actual purpose was different. He opened another page in his file. FSG trained combat medics to stabilize enemy combatants, not to save their lives, but to keep them conscious long enough for field interrogation. The program decided who was worth saving based on intelligence value. Medics were forced to make triage decisions that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with military objectives. Grace's throat moved. She swallowed once, hard. Several medics assigned to the program reported psychological trauma, ethical violations, and coercion. 2 filed complaints that were buried, 1 attempted suicide, and one was listed as killed in action during an operation in Kandahar in March 2011, alongside her husband, Sergeant Ryan Maddox. Hale closed the file. "But here's the thing, Miss Ellison. Sergeant Maddox is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. His death is verified. His body was recovered." He paused. "Yours wasn't." Grace closed her eyes. 13 years. 13 years of silence, of careful, deliberate invisibility, of building a life so small and so quiet that no one would ever think to look for the woman inside it. She changed her name, changed her city, changed everything except the one thing she couldn't, the hands that remembered how to stop a man from dying. And now, because of one night, one impossible night, all of it was unraveling. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The truth," Hale said. "The truth gets people killed. Lies aren't doing much better." She opened her eyes, looked at him, not with fear, not with anger, with the tired, measured look of someone who has calculated every possible outcome and found none of them good. "If I talk to you," she said, "I need to know something first." "What?" "Colton Briggs, the SEAL, is he safe right now?" "He's under guard, 2 agents outside his door." "That's not what I asked. I asked if he's safe." Hale hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. "You don't know who shot him," she said. "We're working on—" "You don't know. And you don't know if the people who sent those shooters have anyone inside this hospital. inside your own agency, inside the protection detail standing outside his door right now. Hale's face changed. Just a fraction, but enough. I've seen how FSG operates, Grace said. They don't send amateurs, they don't leave witnesses, and they don't stop after one attempt. If Briggs is alive and they know it, they're already planning the next move. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. How do you know that? Because 13 years ago, they tried to kill me too, and my husband is the one who died instead. The words landed like a grenade in a closed room. Sandoval uncrossed her arms. Hale sat back in his chair. For 10 full seconds, nobody spoke. Then Grace reached under the collar of her scrubs and pulled out the dog tag. She held it between her fingers, the metal catching the fluorescent light. "Sergeant Ryan Maddox," she said. "My husband. He wasn't part of FSG. He was on a parallel mission in Kandahar. When our team was ambushed, he broke protocol to reach me. He carried me 200 meters under fire. An IED detonated 12 feet from our position. He shielded me with his body." Her voice didn't break. It didn't waver. It came out steady and flat, the way someone speaks when they've rehearsed a grief so many times it's become geography. A landscape they've walked across so often, their feet know every stone. "His last words," she said, were, "Promise me you'll leave. Live somewhere gunshots can't find you." She tucked the dog tag back under her scrubs. "I promised." The military listed me as KIA alongside him. It was convenient. For them, for FSG, for everyone who wanted the program buried. I became nobody. I moved 5 times in 3 years. I got a new identity, a new license, a new life. I came to San Antonio because it was close enough to military medicine that I could work without anyone asking too many questions, and far enough from Washington that nobody would bother looking. And it worked, Hale said, for 12 years. "Until last night," Grace said, "until a man with 20 bullets in his body came through those doors and there was nobody else in the room who could keep him alive. So you broke cover. I saved a life. If that's the same thing, then your system is the problem, not me." Hale rubbed his temples. He'd interrogated hundreds of people. Killers, liars, spies, con artists. He knew what deception looked like. The micro tremors, the eye movements, the rehearsed answers that came too fast or too slow. Grace wasn't lying. Every instinct he had told him she was telling the truth. And that made everything more complicated, not less. "I need to talk to Briggs," Grace said. "That's not possible right now. He's my patient. He's a federal witness. He's a man who almost died on my table 12 hours ago. His coagulation levels need monitoring every 4 hours. If his platelet count drops below 50,000, he'll start bleeding internally again, and your 2 agents outside his door won't be able to do a thing about it." Hale looked at Sandoval. Sandoval looked back. A conversation passed between them in silence, the kind partners develop after years of reading each other's pauses. "Supervised," Hale said. 20 minutes, one of us in the room at all times." "Fine." They walked to the 3rd floor together. Hale in front, Grace in the middle, Sandoval behind. The 2 agents outside Briggs' door checked IDs and stepped aside. Briggs was awake, pale, bandaged, IV lines running from both arms, but awake. His eyes tracked Grace the moment she walked in, and something shifted in his face. Recognition, relief, and something harder to name. "They told me you left," he said. His voice was rough, cracked, the sound of a body that had been to the edge and dragged itself back. "I came back." "You shouldn't have." "Probably not." He almost smiled. Almost. Then his eyes moved to Hale, and the smile died. "Federal friends of yours?" Briggs asked. "They have questions," Grace said. "So do I." She checked his vitals, adjusted the IV drip, and examined his chart with the quick, precise focus of someone who reads numbers the way musicians read notes. "Your platelet count is holding, but barely. Whoever had you on anticoagulants knew what they were doing. Another 12 hours on that protocol, and you would have bled out from a paper cut. Briggs watched her work. You know about FSG, he said, not a question. Grace's hands stopped. One beat, then they resumed. I know what it does to people, she said. Then you know why they want me dead. You were going to testify. Still am, if they let me live long enough. Grace looked at Hale. He's not safe here, you know that. Hale's jaw tightened. We're arranging a transfer to a federal facility where half your staff has security clearances that were issued by the same people who funded FSG? Grace shook her head. You're building a wall with their bricks. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that if you want this man alive long enough to testify, you need to stop thinking like a bureaucrat and start thinking like someone who's been hunted. Sandoval stepped forward. Ms. Ellison, or Maddox, or whoever you are, you're not in a position to. I'm in exactly the position I've always been in, Grace said. The only person in the room who's seen this before. Briggs looked at her with an expression that Hale couldn't quite decode. Not gratitude, something deeper. The look of a man who recognizes someone who carries the same weight he does. She's right, Briggs said quietly. Listen to her. Hale stared at both of them, the dead woman and the dying witness, and felt the ground shift under a case he thought he understood. All right, he said, talk. But before Grace could speak, the overhead intercom crackled. A voice, tight, urgent, broke through. Code Silver, 3rd floor, Code Silver, all personnel, lockdown protocol. Code Silver, active threat in the building. Grace's head snapped toward the door. Hale drew his weapon. Sandoval was already on her radio. Command, this is Sandoval, 3rd floor. What's the situation? Static. Then a voice strained. 2 unidentified males, east stairwell, headed toward the SEALs room. They're armed. Hale grabbed Briggs' bedrail. We need to move him now. Grace was already disconnecting the IV from the pole. Switching to a portable bag she clipped to the bed frame in 3 seconds. She unlocked the wheel brakes, kicked the bed free, and turned to Hale. Service elevator, end of the hall, takes us to the basement. There's a loading dock exit that connects to the ambulance bay. How do you know that? Because the first thing I did when I started working here was memorize every exit in the building. Hale didn't ask why. He didn't need to. They moved fast. Grace pushing the bed, Hale covering the hallway, Sandoval calling for backup. Briggs gripped the side rail with one hand, his jaw locked, pain screaming through every wound in his body, but his eyes sharp, alert, alive. Grace, he said through clenched teeth, save your breath. If they get through, they won't. If they do, the flash drive. Inside my personal effects bag, it has everything. Names, dates, the whole FSG network. Grace looked down at him. For 1 second, the nurse disappeared and someone older, harder, more dangerous looked back. Nobody's getting through, she said. Not tonight. The elevator doors opened. They pushed inside. The doors closed. And as the car descended, Hale turned to Grace with a look that had moved past suspicion into something closer to awe. Who the hell are you? He whispered. Grace watched the floor numbers drop. 3, 2, 1. I'm the woman who made a promise to a dead man, she said, and I intend to keep it. The doors opened to the basement. Cold air, concrete, the distant wail of sirens growing louder. And somewhere above them, in the hospital they just left, footsteps echoed down an empty hallway toward a room that was no longer occupied. The loading dock smelled like diesel and old rain. Grace pushed the bed through the double doors and into the ambulance bay, where 2 rigs sat idle, engines cold. Hale was on his radio, voice low and fast, calling for an extraction unit. Sandoval covered the corridor behind them, weapon drawn, eyes locked on the elevator they just left. Briggs grabbed Grace's wrist. His grip was weak but desperate. They'll send more. I know. Not just here. They'll go to your apartment, your car, anywhere you've ever... I said I know. Grace locked the bed wheels and crouched beside him. Listen to me. Your personal effects bag, where is it? Third floor, nurse's station closet. Grace closed her eyes. Third floor, the same floor they just fled. The same floor where two armed men were now searching an empty room. What's on the flash drive? She asked. Briggs swallowed hard. Everything. Names of every FSG handler from 2007 to 2012. Financial records. Shell companies they used to move money. Medical procurement orders for drugs that don't exist in any civilian pharmacy. And testimony, mine, recorded, time-stamped, 6 hours of it. Who else knows it exists? My lawyer. He's dead. Car accident 2 weeks ago. Wasn't an accident. Grace felt the weight of that sentence settle in her chest. A lawyer who knew too much. A car that went off a road it shouldn't have. And now a SEAL with 20 bullets in his body because someone decided that silence was cheaper than a trial. Hale, she called. The agent turned, phone still pressed to his ear. The flash drive, it's still upstairs, third floor, nurse's station, personal effects closet. If those men find it before your people do, none of this matters. Hale's face changed. He barked into the phone. I need tactical on the third floor now. Secure the nurse's station. There's a personal effects bag for Lieutenant Colton Briggs. Nobody touches it except our team. Nobody. Sandoval's radio crackled. Command, east stairwell clear. 2 suspects exited through the ground floor. Lost visual heading south on Bexar Street. They're gone? Hale said. For now, Sandoval replied. But they saw the empty room. They know we moved him. Grace straightened up. Then we have maybe 30 minutes before they regroup and come back with a better plan. Hale looked at her. How do you know it's 30 minutes? Because that's how long it took them to regroup in Kandahar after the first ambush failed. And these people learned from the same playbook. At 2:47 p.m., a tactical unit secured the third floor. The personal effects bag was recovered, flash drive intact, sealed inside a waterproof pouch tucked into the lining. The 2 armed men had vanished into San Antonio's afternoon traffic like smoke through a screen. Briggs was transferred to a secure room in the hospital's basement, a converted storage area that Hale's team swept, locked, and staffed with 4 armed agents. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't comfortable, but it was defensible, and right now defensible mattered more than anything else. Grace refused to leave. Hale told her she wasn't authorized. She told him his authorization didn't change Briggs' platelet count. He let her stay. At 4:15 p.m., Hale sat across from Grace in a makeshift office. 2 folding chairs and a desk someone had dragged from the supply room. The flash drive sat between them in an evidence bag. Sandoval stood behind Hale, arms crossed, face unreadable. I need your full statement, Hale said. Everything, from the beginning. Grace looked at the flash drive, then at Hale. If I give you everything, what happens to me? That depends on what you give us. And if what I give you is enough to bring down a program that's been operating illegally for 15 years, Hale leaned forward. Then I will personally make sure you're protected. Like you protected Briggs? He took 20 rounds under your watch. The words hit hard. Hale's jaw tightened. Sandoval shifted her weight. Neither of them had an answer for that, because there wasn't one. I'm not trying to insult you, Grace said. I'm trying to make sure you understand what we're dealing with. FSG isn't a rogue unit. It's not some off-the-books operation run by a handful of bad actors. It's a system. It has funding. It has protection. It has people inside your agency, inside the military, inside the medical establishment. That's how it survived this long. That's how they knew where Briggs was. And that's how they'll find me. Then help us cut it out, Hale said. You can't cut out a tumor if you don't know how deep it goes. Then show me. Grace exhaled. She looked at her hands, scarred, steady, The same hands that had held a needle over a dying man's chest 12 hours ago. The same hands that had held her husband's face as he took his last breath 13 years ago. These hands had saved and failed in equal measure. They were all she had left. It started in 2008, she said. I was 23, fresh out of Navy medical training, top of my class in trauma medicine. They assigned me to SEAL Team support operations in Iraq, forward operating bases, field hospitals, the kind of places where you learn surgery by doing it because nobody else was coming to help. She paused, not for effect, for breath. I was good at it, too good. That's what caught their attention. A colonel named Warren Decker pulled me aside after I saved 3 Marines from a roadside bomb. He said there was a special program, classified, high priority. They needed medics who could think fast and stay calm under conditions that would break most people. He said I'd be saving more lives than I could count. And you believed him? Sandoval asked. I was 23 and I just watched a 19-year-old kid die because the medevac was 40 minutes late. Yeah, I believed him. What happened when you joined? Grace's eyes went distant. Not unfocused, the opposite. Hyper-focused on something only she could see. A memory playing behind her pupils like a film she couldn't turn off. The first 6 months were legitimate. Field stabilization techniques, advanced trauma care for austere environments. How to keep a man alive with no blood supply, no surgical kit, no electricity. How to perform a chest tube with a ballpoint pen and a latex glove. How to read a wound and know within 10 seconds whether someone could be saved. And then the missions changed. We weren't just stabilizing our own anymore. They brought us enemy combatants, men pulled from raids, from ambushes, from interrogation sites. Some of them were dying, some of them were close, and our job, my job, was to keep them alive. Not because anyone cared whether they lived, because they needed them conscious long enough to talk. Hale's pen stopped moving. He looked up from his notes. We were told it was necessary, Grace said. We were told the intelligence we extracted saved American lives. And maybe some of it did. But what they didn't tell us was that we were making triage decisions based on intelligence value, not medical need. We were deciding who was worth saving, not as doctors, but as instruments of a military machine. Who made those decisions? Decker gave the orders. We carried them out. But it wasn't just him. There were handlers above him, people we never saw, voices on encrypted calls who told us which patients mattered and which ones didn't. And the ones who didn't matter? Grace looked at Hale, held his gaze. We were told to withdraw care. The room went silent, not the silence of emptiness, the silence of something too heavy to carry and too true to deny. How many? Hale asked. I don't know. I stopped counting after the first year because counting made it impossible to sleep. At 5:30 p.m., Grace told them about Ryan. He wasn't FSG, she said. He was regular Navy, sergeant, stationed at a forward operating base 30 miles from mine. We met during a supply run. He was the kind of man who made you believe that good people still existed in places designed to destroy them. Her voice didn't crack, but it changed. It became softer, heavier, like words being pulled from a depth she rarely visited. We got married in 2009. Small ceremony, base chaplain, 6 witnesses. He didn't know the details of what I was doing. FSG was compartmentalized. But he knew something was wrong. He could see it in me. The way I stopped sleeping. The way I flinched when someone said the word triage. The way I started washing my hands 5, 6, 7 times after every shift, like the blood wouldn't come off. He asked you to leave the program? Hale said. He begged me, and I told him I couldn't because I was in too deep, and the people running FSG made it very clear that leaving wasn't an option. Not without consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind that get filed as training accidents or friendly fire incidents. 2 medics who requested transfers before me. One had a weapons malfunction during a live exercise, lost 3 fingers. The other was reassigned to a patrol unit and stepped on an IED within a week. Nobody could prove anything. That was the point. So you stayed. I stayed until March 2011. At 6:22 p.m., Grace described the night in Kandahar. It was supposed to be a routine extraction. We'd been tasked with stabilizing a high-value target pulled from a compound raid. The team went in. I was in the medical vehicle, 200 meters back, waiting. She stopped, pressed her palms flat against her thighs, steadied herself. The compound was a setup. The target wasn't there. Instead, there were 16 fighters with RPGs and automatic weapons. The extraction team took fire from 3 directions. 2 SEALs went down in the first 30 seconds. The vehicles couldn't move. The road was blocked. And Ryan? Ryan wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that compound. His unit was on a separate mission 8 miles east. But he heard the radio traffic. He heard my call sign, and he broke protocol, left his convoy, commandeered a vehicle, and drove straight into the kill zone. Her voice went flat, clinical. The way someone speaks when the only way to get through a story is to strip all the feeling out of it and deliver it like a medical report. He reached me. The medical vehicle had been hit. I was injured, shrapnel in my left side, concussion, couldn't stand. Ryan pulled me out. He carried me, 200 meters under fire. I could hear the rounds hitting the ground around us, the sound they make when they pass close enough to feel the heat. He got me to cover behind a concrete wall, and then the IED detonated. 12 feet away, he was between me and the blast. She stopped again, longer this time. He died at 11:47 p.m. local time. I held his face in my hands. He looked at me and said, "Promise me you'll leave. Live somewhere where gunshots can't find you." And I said, "I promise." And he smiled, and then he was gone. Hale set his pen down. Sandoval had turned away, her hand covering her mouth. After that, Grace said, the military listed me as KIA. Decker arranged it, not out of kindness, out of convenience. A dead medic can't testify. A dead medic can't file complaints. A dead medic is the cleanest way to close a file. And you let them. I let them because I was broken, and I wanted to disappear. I wanted to become nobody. I wanted to keep the promise I made to the man who died saving me. At 7:45 p.m., Grace told Hale about the warehouse. FSG didn't shut down in 2012, she said. They just moved underground, changed the name, changed the funding channels. But the operation continued, training medics, running black site medical programs, procuring drugs and equipment through shell nonprofits. How do you know? Because for the first 3 years after I disappeared, I tracked them. Not to expose them, I didn't have the courage for that, but to make sure they weren't tracking me. And in the process, I found breadcrumbs, shipping manifests, procurement orders, addresses. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, a single address written in pencil. There's a warehouse on San Antonio's east side, zoned as a medical donation depot. It's been receiving shipments every 6 weeks for the past 4 years. Unmarked crates from 3 different shell companies. I drove past it once, 2 months ago. The security was military grade. Cameras, sensors, reinforced doors. That's not a donation depot. Hale took the paper, looked at it, looked at her. If what you're saying is true, this is the physical evidence we need to prove FSG is still active. It is true, and it's why Briggs was targeted. He was gathering the same kind of evidence, the flash drive, the financial records, the testimony. He was building a case from the inside. I was building one from the outside. We just didn't know about each other until last night. Hale stood. I'm calling in a raid team. Not yet, Grace said. Why the hell not? Because if you raid that warehouse with a standard FBI team, someone on the inside will tip them off. The shipments will stop. The evidence will vanish. And in 6 months, FSG will rebuild somewhere else with a new name and a new budget. Then what do you suggest? Small team, people you trust personally, no advance notice, no warrants filed until you're already inside. That's not how the FBI operates. And 20 bullets in a federal witness is not how witness protection operates. But here we are. Hale stared at her for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and made 2 calls. The first was to a tactical unit commander he'd served with in the Marines. The second was to a federal judge who owed him a favor and answered her phone at midnight. At 11:58 p.m., Hale's team hit the warehouse. 6 agents, no sirens, no advance warning. They cut the lock on the service entrance and moved through the building in pairs. Flashlights sweeping across pallets of shrink-wrapped disaster relief kits that looked untouched and innocent. Then Sandoval found the back room. Steel shelves lined with sealed ampules. No labels, no lot numbers, no FDA markings. Portable surgical kits packed in military-spec cases. 2 field monitors whose firmware screens displayed a Navy diagnostic interface that hadn't been authorized for civilian use since 2010. Hale, Sandoval breathed. This is it. Hale photographed everything. Every crate, every serial number, every shipping label that traced back to a company that existed only on paper. His hands were steady, but his heart was hammering because he understood what this room meant. Not just evidence, but proof. The kind of proof that doesn't disappear when lawyers start arguing about jurisdiction. Then he heard it, a soft footstep, 2 aisles over. Deliberate. He drew his weapon. FBI, show yourself. Silence. Then a voice from the shadows. Low, steady, familiar. Don't shoot. I'm the one who sent you here. Grace stepped into the light, hands raised, black jacket, hair pulled back, face thinner than it had been 12 hours ago, like the stress of the day had been physically carving her away. Hale lowered his weapon. I told you to stay at the hospital. You told me a lot of things. I listened to the ones that made sense. This doesn't make sense. You're a civilian in an active federal... I'm a witness, Grace said, and right now I'm standing in the middle of the evidence that proves everything I told you. So either arrest me or let me help you catalog it, because I know what half of these drugs are, and your lab techs won't. Hale looked at Sandoval. Sandoval shrugged. She's not wrong. They worked until 4 a.m. Grace identified 23 separate pharmaceutical compounds, 11 of which had no civilian equivalent. She explained their uses: field coagulants, synthetic adrenaline variants, neural suppressants designed to keep a patient conscious during extreme pain. Each one a piece of a puzzle that, when assembled, painted a picture of a program that had never stopped operating. At 4:17 a.m., as they were sealing the last evidence crate, Grace's phone buzzed. Unknown number, no caller ID. She answered. A voice, not Decker's, someone younger, colder, said 3 words. We know where. The line went dead. Grace lowered the phone. Her face didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted, the way a soldier's eyes shift when they hear the first mortar and know the second one is already in the air. They know about the warehouse, she said. How? Hale demanded. Because they've always known. This isn't where they store the important things. This is what they let you find. The silence that followed was the kind that changes the shape of a conversation permanently. A decoy? Sandoval said. Not a decoy, a trap. Real evidence, real drugs, real equipment, but planted here to draw attention while they clean the actual operation. We just told them exactly what we know and exactly how close we are. Hale's face went white. Briggs, he's still at the hospital. Grace was already moving toward the door. Then we need to get there before they do. They drove back through empty streets, Hale's speedometer pushing 90, the city blurring past in streaks of sodium light. Grace sat in the back seat with her phone in her hand, scrolling through a list of contacts she hadn't opened in years. Old numbers, dead numbers, people who'd been ghosts longer than she had. She stopped on one name, Colonel Warren Decker, the man who'd recruited her, the man who'd signed her death certificate, the man who 13 years ago had looked her in the eye and told her that what they were doing was necessary. She pressed call. It rang 4 times. Then a voice answered, older now, rougher, but unmistakable. I wondered when you'd call, Decker said. Call off your dogs, Warren. They're not my dogs anymore, haven't been for years. Then whose are they? A long pause. The kind of pause that carries the weight of a confession someone has been rehearsing for a decade. The program outgrew all of us, Grace. I built a machine, and the machine learned to run without me. Then help me shut it down. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. I'm an old man in a house in Virginia with a pension and a bad heart. I'm not the villain you need me to be. 13 people are dead because of what you built. Ryan is dead. Silence. I know, Decker said quietly. I know what it cost. I've been paying for it every night for 13 years. Paying for it isn't enough. I need names. The people running FSG now, not the old guard, not the ones who retired, the ones who are active, the ones who sent 4 men to shoot a Navy SEAL 20 times in a parking garage. Another pause, longer this time. There's a name, Decker said. One name. It won't be enough, but it's a start. Give it to me. Mitchell Voss, defense contractor, runs a medical logistics company called Aegis Meridian out of Arlington. On paper, they supply field hospitals. Off paper, they are FSG. Every dollar, every drug, every order flows through Voss. Grace committed the name to memory. Mitchell Voss, Aegis Meridian, Arlington. If they find out I told you this, they won't. Grace, Decker's voice cracked. For the first time, he sounded like what he was, an old man drowning in his own choices. I'm sorry, for all of it, for what I did to you, for Ryan, for everything. Grace gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. Every part of her wanted to scream at him, to unleash 13 years of rage and grief and betrayal into that phone. But she didn't, because rage was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. Not with Briggs still breathing in a hospital bed. Not with armed men driving through the same dark streets. Apologies don't bring back the dead, Warren, but information might save the living. She hung up. Hale glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Who was that? A ghost, Grace said. Like me. They reached the hospital at 4:52 a.m. The parking lot was quiet. The agents at the basement entrance reported no movement, no suspicious vehicles, no breaches. Briggs was asleep when Grace walked in. His monitors beeped their steady rhythm. His chest rose and fell with the mechanical patience of a body that had decided, against all evidence, to keep going. She sat beside him and checked his vitals. Stable. Holding. The platelet count had climbed to 62,000. Not great, but enough. Enough to keep him alive for another day. And right now, another day was all she was asking for. Briggs' eyes opened. He looked at her in the dim light. You left, he said. I came back. You keep doing that. Force of habit. He shifted painfully and turned his head to face her. Did you find what you needed? I found a name. Mitchell Voss. Aegis Meridian. Briggs's expression changed, slowly, like a man watching a locked door finally swing open. Voss, he repeated. He was on my list, top of it. You know him? He visited our black site in 2010, walked through like he owned the place, shook hands with the handlers, smiled at the medics. Then he signed an order that kept a 16-year-old boy alive for 48 hours of interrogation, when any doctor with a conscience would have let him go. Grace felt the nausea rise. She pushed it down. He's the head of the snake, Briggs said. Then we cut it off. With what? A flash drive and a warehouse full of planted evidence? With your testimony, my testimony, Decker's name, And the one thing Voss didn't plan for. What's that? Grace looked at him. Steady, unblinking. The same look she'd given him in the trauma bay when everyone else in the room had given up. The fact that we're still alive. Hale spent the next 36 hours not sleeping. He sat in the FBI field office with the flash drive contents spread across 3 monitors, cross-referencing every name, every date, every financial thread with the warehouse evidence his team had cataloged. Sandoval ran background checks on Mitchell Voss until her eyes burned. What they found made both of them sick. Aegis Meridian had been awarded 11 federal contracts in the last 5 years. Total value, $94 million. On paper, they supplied portable surgical units to forward operating bases in Syria, Somalia, and Eastern Europe. Field hospitals, trauma kits, medical training programs, every contract approved by a different oversight committee, every audit signed off by a different inspector. Clean, professional, untouchable. But underneath the paperwork, the money moved differently. Sandoval traced a series of wire transfers from Aegis Meridian to 6 shell nonprofits, organizations with names like Global Health Bridge and Frontline Medical Alliance that existed on websites with stock photos and no physical addresses. Those nonprofits purchased pharmaceutical compounds from manufacturers in India and South Korea, compounds that had no FDA approval, no clinical trial records, and no legitimate medical application outside of what Grace had described. At 6:15 a.m. on October 17th, Sandoval set her coffee down and said, "Hale, look at this." She turned her monitor toward him. A procurement order from 2019. Aegis Meridian had purchased 300 units of a synthetic adrenaline compound called MX7 from a lab in Busan. The shipping manifest listed the destination as a USAID warehouse in Djibouti, but the tracking number, which Sandoval had pulled from a customs database she technically wasn't authorized to access, showed the shipment arriving in San Antonio, Texas. Same zip code as the warehouse they'd raided. "They've been running the pipeline through this city for years," Sandoval said. "Right under our noses." Hale stared at the screen. Then he picked up his phone and called Washington. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. Hale did most of the listening. When he hung up, his face had the tight, controlled look of a man who has just been told something that changes the rules of the game he thought he was playing. "What?" Sandoval asked. "They're sending a special counsel. Congressional oversight wants a closed-door hearing. They want Grace and Briggs to testify." "When?" 5 days. Sandoval leaned back. 5 days. And in the meantime, Voss just, what, sits in his Arlington office and waits? "No," Hale said. "In the meantime, we keep them alive." At the hospital, Grace hadn't left Briggs' side in 18 hours. She'd pulled a chair next to his bed and slept in 40-minute intervals, waking each time the monitor beeped differently, each time footsteps passed the door, each time the air shifted in a way her body recognized as wrong before her mind could explain why. 13 years of hiding had turned her nervous system into an alarm that never fully switched off. Briggs watched her sleep, or tried to. He'd been a SEAL for 14 years. He knew what hypervigilance looked like. He knew what it cost. "Grace." She opened her eyes instantly. No grogginess, no disorientation. Just awake, like a switch being flipped. "Your turn," he said. "Go home, eat something, sleep in a bed." "I don't have a home anymore. They know where my apartment is." "Then sleep here. But actually sleep. I'll watch the door." "You have 20 holes in your body." 19. One was a graze. She almost laughed. Almost. It caught in her throat and came out as something between a breath and a sound that might have been joy in another life. "You're impossible," she said. "I've been told." At 9 a.m., Hale arrived with news and a problem. The news was that the hearing was confirmed. Closed session, Senate Intelligence Committee, 5 days out. Grace and Briggs would testify. Decker had been subpoenaed. The flash drive contents were being authenticated by a forensic data team. The problem was Mitchell Voss. He knows, Hale said. He has to know. The warehouse raid, the sealed evidence, the subpoenas. There's no way this stays quiet for 5 days. What's he doing? Grace asked. That's what worries me. Nothing. His office is open. His staff is working. His lawyers haven't filed a single motion. He's acting like none of this is happening. Grace felt the cold settle in her stomach, the kind of cold that comes not from fear, but from recognition. She'd seen this before, the calm before the countermove, the silence that precedes not retreat, but recalibration. He's not ignoring it, she said. He's preparing. Preparing for what? To make sure we never get to that hearing. At 2:30 p.m., the first move came. Not a bullet, not a break-in, something worse, something quieter. Hale's phone rang. The caller was his supervisor in Washington, Deputy Director Alan Keating, a man Hale had trusted for 9 years. Marcus, I need you to stand down on the Aegis Meridian investigation. Hale's grip tightened on the phone. Excuse me? New information has come to light suggesting that the warehouse materials were planted as part of a disinformation operation by a foreign intelligence service. The DOJ is taking over. Your team is to cease all investigative activity and transfer your files by end of day. Alan, it's not a request, Marcus. It's an order. Hale stood in the hallway, phone still warm in his hand, and felt the floor tilt beneath him. He'd been in the bureau long enough to recognize what was happening. Not a cover-up. Those were clumsy, obvious. This was a redirect. Elegant, bureaucratic. The kind of maneuver that doesn't leave fingerprints because it's executed entirely through proper channels by people who know exactly which forms to sign. He found Sandoval in the conference room. They're shutting us down. Who? Keating says DOJ is taking over. Foreign disinformation angle. Sandoval's face went hard. That's garbage. Every piece of evidence in that warehouse traces back to domestic procurement. There's nothing foreign about this. I know. So what do we do? Hale looked at the monitors, the files, the photographs. 3 days of work that could disappear with one phone call and a shredder. We have 2 options, he said. We follow orders and hand everything over, and this gets buried so deep it never sees daylight. Or we don't follow orders, and we bet our careers that a Senate hearing in 5 days will protect us. Sandoval stared at him. You're talking about defying a direct order from the deputy director. I'm talking about doing our job. Those aren't always the same thing, Hale. Today they are. Sandoval was quiet for a long time. Then she walked to her desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a portable hard drive. She plugged it into her workstation and began copying every file, every photograph, every chain of custody document they had. If we're going to burn, she said, we're going to burn with the evidence. At 4:45 p.m., Hale told Grace about the shutdown order. She took it the way she took most bad news, with the still, measured silence of someone calculating her next move, while everyone else was still reacting to the last one. Voss got to your deputy director, she said. I don't know that for certain. You don't need certainty. You need pattern recognition. Keating gives the order. DOJ takes over. The files get reclassified. The hearing gets delayed. And by the time anyone looks at this again, the warehouse is empty. The shell companies are dissolved. And Voss is sipping bourbon in a country without an extradition treaty. That's not going to happen. It's already happening, right now, while we're standing here talking about it. Hale ran his hand over his face. He was tired, bone tired, the kind of tired that seeps into your judgment and makes bad decisions feel reasonable. But underneath the exhaustion, something else was burning, the same thing that had made him join the Bureau in the first place. The stubborn, stupid, necessary belief that the truth matters, even when the system doesn't want it to. I copied everything, he said. Sandoval has a backup. It's off-network, off-site, in a location only we know. Grace looked at him differently then. Not with suspicion, not with the guarded distance she'd maintained since the first interrogation, with something closer to respect. "You're risking your career," she said. "You risked your life. I think I can handle a few bad performance reviews." At 7 p.m., Briggs's condition changed. Grace was checking his vitals when she noticed the numbers shifting, heart rate climbing, blood pressure dropping, a pattern she recognized immediately: internal bleeding, slow, hidden, the kind that doesn't announce itself until it's almost too late. "Get me an ultrasound," she told the attending nurse. "Now." Dr. Aldridge should be the one to. There's no time. His pressure is dropping 15 points every 10 minutes. By the time Aldridge gets here, he'll be in hemorrhagic shock. The nurse hesitated. Grace didn't. She grabbed the portable ultrasound from the crash cart and ran the probe over Briggs's abdomen. The image confirmed what she already knew: a slow bleed from one of the deeper wounds, a vessel that the initial surgery had missed because there were 19 other holes competing for attention. "Briggs," she said, "look at me." His eyes were going glassy, the color draining from his face. "I feel cold," he said. "I know. Stay with me. Keep your eyes open." "Feels like Kandahar," he murmured. "Cold in the desert. Never made sense." "It's not Kandahar. It's San Antonio. You're in a hospital, and you're not dying today." "You keep saying that because it keeps being true." She applied pressure to the bleed point and called for emergency surgical intervention. Aldridge arrived in 6 minutes, fast for a callback, eternity for a bleed. He took one look at the ultrasound and went pale. "How long has this been bleeding?" "Slowly, maybe since last night. It accelerated in the last hour." "We need to operate, now." "He can't go under general anesthesia. His system won't handle it, not with his platelet count." Aldridge looked at her, the same look he'd given her 3 nights ago, the look of a surgeon being told what to do by a nurse who shouldn't know what she knows. But this time there was no resistance in it, only the hard, honest acceptance of a man who has learned, painfully, to listen. "What do you recommend?" "Local anesthetic, targeted repair. I can assist. I've done this before." "In a hospital?" "In a tent with a flashlight and a bottle of vodka for sterilization." Aldridge almost smiled. "Prep him. You're assisting." The surgery took 90 minutes. Grace's hands never shook, not once. She held retractors, suctioned blood, identified the torn vessel, and guided Aldridge to the repair site with the quiet precision of someone who had done this in conditions that made an operating room feel like a luxury. At 8:47 p.m., Aldridge closed the last suture. Briggs's vitals stabilized. The bleeding stopped. Aldridge stripped his gloves and looked at Grace across the operating table. "You saved him again." "We saved him." "No, I repaired a vessel. You found it before it killed him. That's not the same thing." He paused. "Whoever trained you, whatever program, whatever war, whatever hell you went through, they created something extraordinary." "They created something broken," Grace said. "I chose to use the pieces." Aldridge held her gaze. "The hearing. I heard about it. I want you to know, if you need someone to testify about what you did in this hospital, I'll be there." Grace blinked. She hadn't expected that, not from him, not from the man who'd wanted her badge 3 days ago. "Why?" she asked. "Because I've been a surgeon for 26 years, and I've never seen anyone do what you did. And because the world doesn't need fewer people like you, it needs more. Whatever it takes to make that possible, I'll do." At 10:15 p.m., Grace sat alone in the hallway outside Briggs' room. He was sleeping, real sleep this time, the kind that comes after the body has been forced to choose between living and dying, and has chosen living one more time. Her phone buzzed. An encrypted text from an unknown number, different from the last one. "Ms. Maddox, you don't know me. My name is Catherine Voss. Mitchell is my father. I have information you need. Meet me tomorrow, 6 a.m., Riverwalk South Entrance. Come alone. Grace read it 3 times. Then she read it again. Catherine Voss, the daughter of the man who had funded the program that destroyed her life. The daughter of the man who was, right now, trying to bury every piece of evidence that could bring him down. It could be a trap. Every instinct she had, the ones honed in Kandahar, the ones sharpened by 13 years of hiding, screamed that it was a trap. But Grace Maddox had spent 13 years listening to her instincts tell her to run, and running had brought her here, to a hospital hallway, with a dying man behind one door and a broken system behind every other. She typed back, "I'll be there." At 5:52 a.m. on October 18th, Grace stood at the south entrance of the San Antonio Riverwalk. The air was cool. The city was just beginning to stir. Joggers, dog walkers, a few early commuters crossing the bridges overhead. At 6:01, a woman approached. Mid-30s, professional. Dark hair pulled back. She wore sunglasses that she removed as she got closer, revealing eyes that were red-rimmed and exhausted. Grace Maddox? Catherine Voss? The woman nodded. She was carrying a leather messenger bag that she held against her body like it contained something alive. "Thank you for coming," Catherine said. "I know how this looks." "It looks like a trap." "I know, it's not, but you have no reason to believe me, so I'll make this fast." She reached into the bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "My father doesn't know I'm here. If he did, I'd be in the same danger you are." "Why are you here?" Catherine's chin trembled. She steadied it with visible effort. "Because 3 weeks ago, I found files on my father's personal server. Files he doesn't know I accessed. I'm a data analyst. It's what I do. I find patterns in numbers. And the patterns I found made me want to throw up." She handed Grace the envelope. "Financial records going back to 2015. Internal communications between my father and 6 senior military officials. Authorization orders for operations that were never reported to Congress. And a list. A list of what? People who were eliminated. Not enemy combatants, not targets. People, medics, analysts, contractors who knew about FSG and were considered liabilities." Catherine's voice broke. "There are 23 names on that list. 2 of them are women who were reported as killed in action. One of them is you." Grace opened the envelope. She scanned the first page. Names, dates, methods. Car accident, training exercise, friendly fire, overdose, suicide. 23 lives ended with 23 lies. Each one filed neatly in a system designed to make murder look like paperwork. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. "Your name is on page 6, Catherine said quietly. "Grace Maddox. Status, eliminated. Method, KIA, confirmed. Date, March 2011. She paused. "My father signed that order. He authorized your death. And when the military told him you were gone, he closed the file and moved on." Grace looked at the page. Her own name, her own death. Signed by a man who'd never met her, who'd never seen her face, who decided she was a number that needed to be zeroed out. "Why are you doing this?" Grace asked. Catherine's eyes filled. "Because he's my father, and I love him. And he's a monster, and I can't live in the same world as both of those truths without doing something about it." Grace looked at this woman, this stranger who shared blood with the man who tried to erase her, and felt something she hadn't felt in 13 years. Not sympathy, not trust, something more dangerous. Hope. "This is enough," Grace said. "Combined with the flash drive and the warehouse evidence, this is enough to bring him down. It's enough to bring down more than him. Those 6 military officials, 2 of them are still active. One is a sitting member of the Defense Advisory Board." Grace tucked the envelope inside her jacket. "The hearing is in 4 days." "I know. That's why I came now. In 4 days, my father will have had time to shred what he can reach and silence who he can find. But he can't shred what he doesn't know is missing, and he doesn't know about these files. He'll find out. When this goes public, he'll know it was you. Catherine put her sunglasses back on. Her hands were steady now, the way hands get when a decision has been made and there's nothing left to do but walk forward. I know, she said. That's the price. She turned and walked away. No goodbye, no handshake, just the quiet retreat of a woman who had just betrayed the most powerful person in her life because the truth weighed more than love. Grace watched her go. Then she pulled out her phone and called Hale. I have something, she said. What kind of something? The kind that ends this. At 8:30 a.m., Hale spread Catherine's documents across the conference table. He read for 40 minutes without speaking. Sandoval read over his shoulder. Neither of them said a word until Hale reached page 14, the elimination list. 23 people, he said. His voice sounded like it had been scraped across asphalt. 23 people murdered and filed as accidents. And those are just the ones she found, Grace said. There could be more. Voss authorized all of this? His signature is on every order. Hale stood up, walked to the window, stood there for a full minute staring at nothing. Then he turned around. We're not waiting 4 days, he said. I'll get the hearing moved up. I'll call the committee chair directly. I'll call the senator's personal line if I have to. We present this evidence tomorrow, or Voss has time to destroy what's left. Your deputy director ordered you to stand down. My deputy director can fire me after the hearing. I'll hand him my badge myself. But these 23 people are not going to be footnotes in a classified file that nobody ever reads. Grace looked at him. This man, this bureaucrat in a wrinkled suit who had started this investigation, suspicious of her, and was now willing to destroy his own career to finish it, was the last person she'd expected to find in her corner. Thank you, she said. It was the first time she'd said those words to anyone since Ryan. Hale nodded. Then he picked up the phone and started making calls. At 11 p.m., the hearing was confirmed for the following morning. Emergency session. Closed door. Senate Intelligence Committee. 2 witnesses, Grace Maddox and Lieutenant Colton Briggs. 1 subpoenaed party, Colonel Warren Decker, attending via secure video link from his home in Virginia. Subject, Field Stabilization Group. Classification, top secret, with provisions for partial declassification pending committee vote. Grace sat beside Briggs' bed. He was awake, alert, the color slowly returning to his face. The surgery had bought him time. The transfusions were holding. His body was fighting its way back the way only a SEAL's body can, with stubborn, furious, unreasonable persistence. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow. Are you ready? Briggs looked at her. I've been ready for 3 years. Every night since I decided to testify, I've been rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd describe what I saw, the faces, the sounds, the way it felt to watch a man die because someone decided his intelligence value had expired. He paused. But I never thought I'd be saying it next to someone who understands. Grace reached out and took his hand. Not a romantic gesture, not a nurse's touch. The grip of one soldier to another, firm, steady, the kind of contact that says, I'm here and I'm not leaving, and we're going to walk through this together. Ryan used to say that the hardest part of war isn't the fighting, she said. It's the remembering, because the fighting ends. The remembering doesn't. Smart man. The smartest I ever knew. At 3 a.m., Grace couldn't sleep. She sat in the hospital chapel, a small, quiet room on the first floor that smelled like wood polish and old prayers. She didn't pray. She didn't believe in a God who allowed the things she'd seen. But she sat in the silence and let it hold her the way Ryan used to hold her after the bad nights, without words, without questions, just presence. She pulled out his dog tag, held it in her palm, felt the weight of it, the name, the blood type, the faith he'd carried into a war that took everything from him except his love for her. "I'm going to tell them everything tomorrow," she whispered. "All of it. The things I did. The things I let happen. The things I should have stopped and didn't because I was scared." She closed her fingers around the metal. "I know you wanted me to live a quiet life. I tried. God, I tried. But quiet doesn't fix what's broken, and silence doesn't honor the dead. It just makes their killers comfortable." She looked up. The chapel was empty. The cross on the wall caught the low light and held it. "I'm going to keep my promise, Ryan, just not the way you meant it. I'm going to live, but I'm going to live loud enough that nobody can pretend this didn't happen." She tucked the dog tag back under her shirt, stood up, walked out. In the hallway, Hale was waiting. He hadn't been listening. He'd just been standing there, coat on, car keys in hand, the way a man stands when he knows the morning is going to change everything, and he's choosing to face it on his feet. "Car's outside," he said. "We leave at 6. Grace nodded. "Grace," she turned. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever they decide, however this plays out, what you did matters. The lives you saved, the truth you carried, it matters." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said the truest thing she knew. "It won't matter until it changes something." Hale held the door open. Grace walked through. Behind them, the hospital hummed its quiet, relentless rhythm. The sound of machines keeping people alive, of hands doing work that never makes the news, of promises kept in the dark by people whose names the world will never know. At 5:58 a.m. on October 19th, Grace Maddox put on a black suit that didn't quite fit and tucked her husband's dog tag under her blouse, cool metal against the pulse she could never stop counting. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw two women, the one who had promised to disappear and the one who had decided to be seen. She chose the second one. The hearing room was smaller than Grace expected. A long table, 8 chairs, a stenographer in the corner with her fingers already hovering over the keys, 2 armed guards at the door, a screen on the far wall showing a live feed, Colonel Warren Decker sitting in his living room in Virginia, wearing a dress shirt buttoned to the collar and the expression of a man attending his own funeral. Grace sat down. The chair was hard. The table was cold under her palms. Briggs sat beside her, one arm still in a sling, his jaw set. His breathing controlled the way a man breathes when he's managing pain he refuses to acknowledge. Hale and Sandoval sat behind them in the gallery, close enough to be present, far enough to be powerless. Senator Margaret Callaway, chair of the Intelligence Committee, opened the session at 7:02 a.m. She was 71 years old, silver hair, reading glasses perched on her nose, and the kind of voice that had spent decades asking questions that people didn't want to answer. "This is a closed emergency session of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. The subject is Field Stabilization Group, designated FSG, a classified military medical program alleged to have operated outside congressional oversight from 2007 to present. Our witnesses today are Grace Maddox, former Navy combat medic, and Lieutenant Colton Briggs, United States Navy SEALs." She looked up from her notes. "Ms. Maddox, you have been formally declared dead since March 2011. I want you to know that in 34 years of public service, this is the first time I've taken testimony from a dead woman." A few uncomfortable shifts in the chairs around the table. Grace didn't smile. "I'd like to start living again, Senator. That's why I'm here." "Then let's begin. In your own words, tell this committee what Field Stabilization Group was, what it did, and why you believe it is still operating." Grace placed her hands flat on the table, the same way she had in every interrogation room, every break room, every moment when she needed to steady herself before saying something that couldn't be unsaid. FSG was created in 2007 as a classified extension of Tactical Combat Casualty Care. Its original mandate was to develop advanced trauma stabilization techniques for use in austere battlefield conditions. I was recruited in 2008 by Colonel Warren Decker, who is present via video link today. She didn't look at the screen. She didn't need to. For the first 6 months, the program operated within its stated mandate. We developed techniques that saved lives, American lives, coalition lives, techniques I still use today. But in early 2009, the mission changed. We were ordered to apply those same techniques to enemy combatants, not for medical purposes, but for intelligence extraction. Our job became keeping dying men alive long enough to be interrogated. "Who gave that order?" Calloway asked. Colonel Decker relayed the orders, but they originated above him. I never saw the names. I only heard voices on encrypted calls. Handlers who told us which patients had intelligence value and which didn't. And the patients who didn't have intelligence value? Grace's throat tightened. She'd rehearsed this answer 100 times. In her apartment, in her car, in the hospital chapel at 3 in the morning. It never got easier. We were told to withdraw care. The room didn't gasp. It was worse than that. It went still. The kind of stillness that happens when something true enters a space that was built to contain lies. Senator Calloway removed her glasses. "You're telling this committee that United States military personnel were ordered to let human beings die based on their intelligence value?" "Yes, Senator." "How many?" "I don't have an exact number. During my time in the program, 18 months, I personally witnessed or was involved in the care withdrawal of at least 11 individuals." A man at the end of the table, Senator David Reeves, younger, sharper, the kind of politician who asked questions like he was cross-examining a hostile witness, leaned forward. "Ms. Maddox, you're asking us to believe that a sanctioned military program engaged in what amounts to selective euthanasia. Do you have proof beyond your own testimony?" "I do." Grace opened the envelope Catherine Voss had given her. "These are internal financial records, communication logs, and authorization orders from Aegis Meridian, a defense contractor run by Mitchell Voss. They document the program's funding, its operational structure, and its continued activity from 2012 to the present day." She spread the documents across the table. Page 14 contains a list of 23 individuals, American citizens, who were eliminated because they were considered liabilities to the program. Medics, analysts, contractors. Each death was disguised as an accident, a training incident, or a combat casualty. She paused. "My name is on that list. Page 6. Grace Maddox. Status: eliminated. Method: killed in action. Date: March 2011. Signed by Mitchell Voss." Reeves picked up the page, read it. His face changed, the color draining slowly, like water leaving a glass. "Where did you obtain these documents?" "From a source I'm not at liberty to identify." "Ms. Maddox, this committee requires..." "Senator, with respect, that source risked everything to get these documents to me. If I reveal their identity in this room, they will be dead within a week. I've already watched enough people die for this program. I won't add another." Calloway held up her hand. "We'll address sourcing in closed executive session. Continue." At 8:15 a.m., Briggs testified. He was quieter than Grace, slower, not because he was uncertain, but because every sentence cost him something. Physical pain from the wounds that were still healing, and the other kind of pain, the kind that lives in the memory and never fully scars over. "I was deployed to a forward operating base in Helmand Province in 2010, he said. "My unit conducted a joint operation with an intelligence team that I later learned was connected to FSG. During that operation, I witnessed a combat medic, not Ms. Maddox, a different medic, ordered to keep an injured Afghan teenager alive for interrogation. The boy was 15 years old. He had shrapnel wounds in his abdomen and both legs. He was in agony." Briggs's voice stayed level. His hands did not. The interrogation lasted 9 hours. When it was over, the handler told the medic to withdraw care. The medic refused. The handler pulled rank. The medic was reassigned the next day. The boy died that night. "Did you report this?" Calloway asked. "I reported it through my chain of command. The report was acknowledged and filed. Nothing happened. 6 months later, the medic who refused, a woman named Corporal Diana Reyes, was killed in what was classified as a friendly fire incident during a night patrol." He looked down at the table. "Her name is on page 14 of those documents, number 11. The room held its breath. "I spent the next 3 years gathering evidence, recording conversations, copying files, building a case that I intended to bring to this committee through proper channels. 3 weeks ago, my lawyer, the only person who knew about the flash drive, was killed in a car accident in Arlington, Virginia. 1 week after that, I was shot 20 times in a parking garage in San Antonio." "And you believe these events are connected to your planned testimony?" Reeves asked. Briggs looked at him with a flat, unblinking stare of a man who had spent 14 years in the most dangerous places on Earth and had learned to recognize the obvious when civilians couldn't. "Senator, I didn't get shot 20 times because of a parking dispute." At 9:30 a.m., Decker testified. His face on the screen was gray. His voice was thin. He looked like a man who had been carrying a weight for so long that his body had finally started to collapse under it. "I created FSG," he said. "I designed the program. I recruited the personnel. I gave the orders." Calloway leaned forward. "Colonel Decker, you understand that this testimony may result in criminal charges?" "I understand, Senator. I've understood for 13 years. I've been waiting for someone to ask. Why didn't you come forward yourself?" Decker closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "Because I was afraid. Because the people above me made it clear that coming forward would not result in justice. It would result in my disappearance. And because I told myself that if I stayed quiet, at least I could protect the people who'd served under me." "You didn't protect them," Grace said. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. 23 of them are dead." Decker flinched. On the screen, his shoulders dropped. The posture of a man who has been hit with a truth he already knew, but has never heard spoken aloud. "I know," he said. "I know what I failed to do. I know what I allowed to happen. And I know that no testimony, no apology, no confession will bring back Sergeant Ryan Maddox or Corporal Reyes or any of the others." He looked directly into the camera, directly at Grace. "But I can give you what I should have given you 13 years ago. The truth. Every name, every order, every dollar. I have copies of everything. Files that Voss doesn't know exist, stored on a server he's never had access to. I'll give you all of it." Grace stared at the screen, at the man who had recruited her, trained her, signed her death certificate, and then spent 13 years living with the guilt of it. She wanted to hate him. Part of her did, but hatred was heavy, and she'd been carrying enough weight for one lifetime. "Then give it," she said, "and let this be the last secret any of us keeps." At 10:47 a.m., Senator Calloway called a recess. The committee members filed out. The guards stayed. Hale and Sandoval approached the table. "How did it go?" Grace asked. Hale's face was carefully controlled, but his eyes gave him away. "Calloway's drafting an emergency referral to the Department of Justice. She's requesting a special counsel appointment. Reeves is pushing for immediate declassification of the FSG files. And Voss? An arrest warrant is being prepared. FBI Tactical will execute it within the hour." Grace exhaled. For the first time in 5 days, for the first time in 13 years, she felt the pressure in her chest ease by a fraction. Not disappear, not dissolve, just loosen, the way a fist unclenches when the fight is finally over, and the body remembers what it feels like to simply breathe. "There's something else," Sandoval said. "Deputy Director Keating resigned this morning. Before the hearing started, no statement, no press conference, just a letter on his desk in an empty office." "He knew," Grace said. "He knew enough," Hale replied. "Whether he was compromised or just complicit, that's for the investigation to determine." At 12:15 p.m., Mitchell Voss was arrested at his office in Arlington, Virginia. He was sitting at his desk when the agents came through the door. He didn't run. He didn't reach for a phone. He looked up from his computer, adjusted his tie, and said, "I'd like to speak to my attorney." The attorney never came. By 3 p.m., Voss's assets were frozen. Aegis Meridian's offices were sealed. 6 senior military officials connected to FSG were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The machine was breaking. Not all at once, not cleanly. Machines like this never break cleanly. They fracture, they leak, they grind to a halt one gear at a time. But the fracture had started, and this time, nobody was going to weld it back together in the dark. Grace learned about the arrest from a television in the hospital break room. She was back at Alamo Grace, still in the black suit, still wearing Ryan's dog tag. She'd come straight from the hearing because there was nowhere else she wanted to be. Briggs was sitting up in bed when she walked in. Someone had brought him a newspaper, actual paper, the kind that smells like ink and yesterday. The headline read, "Defense Contractor Arrested in Connection with Classified Military Program." "Front page," Briggs said, holding it up. "I noticed. Your name's not in it." "Good. Voss is going to fight this. He's got lawyers, connections, money. Let him fight. He'll fight the evidence, not us, and the evidence doesn't blink." Briggs set the newspaper down. He looked at her the way he'd been looking at her since the first night, with something that had started as gratitude and grown into something he didn't have a word for yet. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. Grace sat in the chair beside his bed, the same chair she'd sat in every night since the first one, the chair that had become, without her planning it, the place where she felt most like herself. "Aldridge offered me my job back, not as Grace Ellison, as Grace Maddox. Full reinstatement. The board approved it this morning." "You going to take it?" "I'm thinking about it." "What's there to think about?" She looked at her hands. "I broke protocol. I defied a surgeon in his own trauma bay. I used techniques that aren't authorized for civilian practice. I changed a patient's treatment plan without physician approval. Any one of those things should have ended my career. And instead they saved 9 lives. That doesn't make it right." "No," Briggs said. "It makes it necessary. There's a difference." Grace smiled. Small. Real. The kind of smile that doesn't perform for anyone. It just arrives because the body has finally allowed itself a moment of something other than survival. "Ryan would have liked you," she said. "Yeah? He would have called you stubborn and reckless and said you had no business checking yourself out of a hospital with 19 holes in your body. 19. One was a graze. He would have liked that joke too." 3 weeks passed. The investigation expanded. Decker's files proved even more damning than the flash drive. 7 years of operational records, handler identities, financial trails that led to 4 separate government agencies. The special counsel impaneled a grand jury. Indictments were expected within months. Catherine Voss's identity was never made public. Grace kept that promise the way she kept all her promises. Absolutely. At Alamo Grace Hospital, life continued. The ER hummed its eternal rhythm. Patients came and went. Sirens rose and fell. The work was ordinary. That was what made it matter. Grace signed her reinstatement papers on a Tuesday morning. The woman behind the HR desk looked at the name and then looked at Grace. "Maddox," she said. "Welcome back." "Thank you, it's good to be back." "Returning or recommitting?" Grace picked up the pen. "There's a difference?" "That's what I'm asking." Grace signed her name, her real name, in full, for the first time in 13 years, and set the pen down. "Recommitting," she said. Her first shift started at 7 p.m. By 7:04, a boy came in with a crushed hand, sobbing, terrified, his mother running beside the gurney with tears streaming down her face. Grace took the boy's good hand and held it. "Hey, look at me. What's your name?" "Marcus," he choked out. "Marcus, I'm Grace." I'm going to take care of you. You're going to be okay. Can you squeeze my fingers? He squeezed. Weak, but there. Good. That's really good. You're brave, Marcus. Braver than you know. By 7:13, an elderly woman arrived whose heart was fluttering so fast it looked like a hummingbird on the monitor. Grace sat beside her and spoke calmly while adjusting her medication. The woman grabbed Grace's wrist and said, "Am I dying?" "Not today, ma'am. Not on my watch." By 7:22, a construction worker came through the doors with blood pressure so high the attending physician thought the machine was broken. It wasn't. Grace stabilized him in 14 minutes. The work wasn't cinematic. It wasn't dramatic. Nobody was going to make a movie about a crushed hand or a fluttering heart or a blood pressure reading. But that was the point. That was always the point. The work was holy because it was small, because it happened every night, in every hospital, in every city, performed by people whose names would never make headlines, whose hands would never stop shaking long enough to accept applause. Near midnight, Grace paused at the med station. She touched Ryan's dog tag through her scrubs. The metal was warm now, warmed by her own pulse, her own living body, her own stubborn refusal to stop breathing. She didn't whisper to him this time. She didn't need to. The conversation between them had changed. It was no longer a plea, no longer an apology, no longer the desperate monologue of a woman talking to a ghost. It was silence, comfortable silence, the kind that exists between two people who have said everything that needs to be said and can finally just be. A shadow fell across the doorway. Briggs stood there, dressed in civilian clothes for the first time since she'd met him. Jeans, a button-down shirt, one sleeve slightly loose over the arm that was still healing. He looked like a different man, not a patient, not a witness, not a target. Just a man who had decided to keep showing up. "You're still here," he said. Grace finished her chart, clicked save, looked up at him with an expression that had learned, slowly and painfully, how to carry something lighter than grief. "You're still alive," she said. "Occupational hazard. Shouldn't you be resting? Shouldn't you?" "I'm working." "So am I," she raised an eyebrow. "Working on what?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. Not wrapped, not fancy, just a plain wooden box, the kind you'd find in an antique store or a military surplus shop. "Briggs, what is this?" "Open it." She lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a piece of cotton, was a medal. A Navy and Marine Corps medal, the highest non-combat decoration for heroism. And beneath it, a folded letter on Department of the Navy letterhead. "They're reinstating your service record," Briggs said. "Full honors. Your KIA status has been officially reversed. As of today, Petty Officer Second Class Grace Maddox is alive, recognized, and decorated for extraordinary heroism in the line of duty." Grace stared at the medal. Her vision blurred. She blinked hard. Then again, "I didn't do it for a medal," she said. "I know, that's why you deserve one." She closed the box, held it against her chest, felt the weight of it. Not the medal, but everything it represented. 13 years of silence. 13 years of hiding. 13 years of carrying a dead woman's name because the living one was too dangerous to keep. And now, finally, her name was hers again. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me. Thank the 46 senators who read your testimony and couldn't sleep afterward." A trauma call crackled over the intercom. "Multi-car accident on I-35. ETA, 6 minutes. 3 critical, incoming." Every nurse on the floor moved. Every doctor stood. The ER shifted from stillness to purpose in the space of a heartbeat. That beautiful, terrible machinery of saving lives, kicking into gear the way it did every night, every shift, every time someone's world fell apart and they needed a place to land. Grace set the box on the counter, pulled on her gloves, felt the snap of latex against her wrists, that small, familiar sound that meant the work was about to begin again. Briggs watched her. "You're not going to take the night off?" "There's no night off. There's only the next patient." "Grace." She turned. He looked at her the way he had in the trauma bay on the first night, when he'd opened his eyes and seen the woman who refused to let him die. But now there was something else in that look, something that had been growing in the spaces between crisis and silence, between testimony and recovery, between two people who understood what it meant to survive something that should have destroyed them. "When this shift is over," he said, "I owe you a cup of coffee." She almost laughed. "You owe me a lot more than coffee." "Then let me start with coffee and work my way up." The ambulance sirens were getting louder. The team was assembling. The monitors were ready. The bay doors were about to open. Grace looked at Briggs one last time. "I'll hold you to that." Then she turned, walked to Bay 3, and took her position. The doors burst open. The gurney came through. The noise rose. Vital signs, shouted orders, the controlled chaos of people doing the hardest work in the world with steady hands and full hearts. And in the middle of all of it, Grace Maddox, the woman who was declared dead 13 years ago, who kept a promise to a man she loved, who saved a stranger with 20 bullets in his body, who stood before a Senate committee and told the truth that a machine spent millions trying to bury, put her hands on a patient and began again. Not because anyone asked her to, not because a medal told her she was brave, not because the world had finally recognized what she'd sacrificed, because someone was bleeding, and she knew how to stop it. That was always enough. That was always the reason. She leaned close to the patient and said the words she'd said 1,000 times before, the words that had become her prayer, her promise, her proof of life. "I'm Grace. I'm going to take care of you. You're going to be okay." The monitors beeped. The cart rolled. The night bent its head and went to work. And Grace Maddox, finally, fully, irreversibly alive, went to work with it.